I never thought I would be the kind of man who would find himself in this situation. My name is David, and I'm a 35-year-old marketing executive living in a small but vibrant city. I've always prided myself on my stability, both in my career and in my personal life. I met Sarah in college, and we fell in love amidst books and late-night study sessions. Our relationship blossomed into marriage, and for the past 10 years we've built a life together, filled with laughter, dreams, and the occasional mundane routine that comes with being comfortably settled. I thought I knew her like the back of my hand. Sarah is bright and witty, with a sense of humor that can light up even the darkest days. She's the kind of woman who makes friends wherever she goes, and I always admired her ability to connect with people. But that same charm, it seems, can also lead to danger. I never expected that charm would be the very thing that led her to betray me. The day I found out about the affair was like any other, or at least I thought it was. I had just returned from a long day at work, ready to unwind with a nice dinner. Instead, I found Sarah sitting on the couch, her expression unreadable. It was then that she dropped the bombshell. She had been seeing someone else, a stand-up comedian named Jake. The words hung in the air like a foul odor, suffocating me. It was as if the world had tilted on its axis and I was left scrambling to regain my balance. My heart raced as I processed her confession. I felt a rush of emotion, shock, disbelief, anger, and a deep, gnawing pain in my chest. How could she do this to us, to me? The questions churned in my mind like a storm, each one more relentless than the last. Did I miss the signs? Was I that oblivious to her needs? I remember staring at her, waiting for an explanation, but all I received was a half-hearted apology. The moment felt surreal, like a scene from a bad movie. I could feel my fists clenching, my breath quickening, but I couldn't speak. I was paralyzed by a torrent of emotions that left me feeling both angry and utterly defeated. She had betrayed the trust we had built, and for what? A fleeting fling with a man whose career revolved around making people laugh. As I sat there, the weight of her confession settled heavily on my shoulders, and I realized I was at a crossroads. I could either wallow in my pain or take control of the situation. But what did that mean? Revenge. The thought of it stirred something dark within me. It felt wrong, but the idea of letting Jake walk away unscathed was unbearable. I wanted him to feel the same anguish I was experiencing. It was then that the gears in my mind began to turn. I pictured Jake, the smug comedian, basking in the glow of laughter and applause while I was left picking up the pieces of my shattered life. He had to pay for this. But how? I began to strategize, mapping out a plan in my mind. I had to think carefully. I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. I considered the implications of what I was about to do. Revenge has a way of consuming you, blinding you to the consequences of your actions. But I was determined to make Jake the punchline of his own tragic joke. I couldn't just sit idly by while my life crumbled. I would make sure he understood that his actions had repercussions, not just for me, but for him as well. As I reflected on my next steps, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I had a plan forming, one that would require stealth and precision. I would gather information about Jake, his shows, his routines, and the people who supported him. I would expose him for the fraud he was, and in doing so, I would reclaim my sense of power and dignity. But as I sat there, a mix of anger and determination coursing through me, I realized that this was just the beginning. I had to be smart about this. I couldn't rush into anything without careful consideration. The stakes were high, and I needed to ensure that my revenge was executed flawlessly. And so, my journey began, one that would take me down a dark path of betrayal and retribution. I had no idea how far I was willing to go, but one thing was clear. I would not let Jake get away with this. He would regret ever crossing my path. In the days that followed Sarah's confession, I found myself spiraling into a state of obsessive planning. I felt like a detective in a crime novel, piecing together clues to uncover the truth about this man who had invaded my life. I needed to know everything about Jake, the comedian who had stolen my wife's heart, even if just temporarily. Every detail mattered, and I was determined to gather as much information as I could. I started with a simple online search. Jake was not just some random guy. He was a rising star in the local comedy circuit. His social media profiles were filled with clips of his stand-up routines, and he had a decent following. I watched his performances, trying to dissect his style and humor. He was charismatic, confident, and had a knack for making people laugh. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy as I watched him on stage, commanding attention while I sat in my living room, feeling like a ghost in my own life. The more I learned about him, the more I felt anger bubbling inside me. He was everything I was not: free-spirited, adventurous, and seemingly without a care in the world. I could picture him charming Sarah, with his jokes making her laugh in ways I hadn't for a long time. I felt a deep sense of inadequacy, but I pushed that feeling aside. This was not about me. It was about justice. I needed to make sure he paid for what he had done. I began frequenting local comedy clubs, pretending to be just another audience member. Each time I sat in the dimly lit room, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. I watched other comedians perform, taking note of their interactions with the crowd, but my focus was always on Jake. I studied his routines, his mannerisms, and how he engaged with the audience. I wanted to find a way to undermine his confidence, to expose him for the fraud I believed him to be. One night, I overheard a group of comedians talking in the back of the club after a show. They were discussing the importance of authenticity in comedy, how the best material comes from real-life experiences. That's when it hit me. If Jake's humor was rooted in his life, I could use that against him. I needed to dig into his past, find something that would tarnish his image, and render him a laughingstock. I started to investigate, talking to people, gathering dirt. I learned that Jake had a history of failed relationships and a penchant for using personal anecdotes in his routines. He had a reputation for being a ladies' man, which only fueled my resolve. I could turn his own stories against him. I began to sketch out a plan, one that would unfold like a meticulously crafted joke, with him as the punchline. As I delved deeper, I discovered that Jake had once dated a woman who was now a local journalist. This was the key I needed. I reached out to her, pretending to be a concerned friend of Jake's who had heard troubling rumors about him. I fed her a story about how he had been unfaithful, using the very experiences he joked about on stage to betray those who trusted him. I painted a picture of a man who was not only a cheat, but also a coward hiding behind his jokes. The journalist was intrigued, and I could sense the wheels turning in her mind. I subtly encouraged her to investigate further, suggesting that she look into his past relationships. I knew that if I could get her to write an exposé, it would not only damage his reputation but also add a layer of credibility to my revenge. Jake would be forced to face the consequences of his actions, and I would be the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. During this time, I also had to navigate my relationship with Sarah. She was oblivious to my plans, often trying to reconnect with me, seeking forgiveness. I found myself torn. A part of me wanted to confront her about her betrayal to make her understand the pain she had caused, but another part of me whispered that I needed to focus on my revenge first. I couldn't let her distract me from my goal. I needed to be cold, calculated. One evening, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, she reached out and touched my hand, her eyes filled with regret. "David, I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to get this far. Can we work through this?" Her words were like daggers, twisting in my heart. I wanted to scream that it was too late, that I could never look at her the same way again, but I held my tongue, masking my true feelings behind a polite smile. "Let's take it one day at a time," I replied, knowing that my mind was already far from any reconciliation. As the journalist began her investigation, I felt a sense of excitement mixed with anxiety. I was on the brink of unleashing my plan, and soon, Jake would be the one facing the fallout. I couldn't wait to see the expression on his face when he realized that the jokes he made about his life had come back to haunt him. But even as I plotted my revenge, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking a dangerous line. Each day brought me closer to the moment of truth, where I would have to confront not only Jake, but also the reality of my own choices. The stakes were high, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. As the days turned into weeks, my plan began to unfold like a carefully orchestrated play. I was no longer just David, the betrayed husband. I had morphed into a man on a mission, cloaked in secrecy and determination. I felt a rush of adrenaline every time I thought about the impending downfall of Jake, the comedian who had so carelessly disrupted my life. The anticipation was intoxicating, and I reveled in the thought of seeing him squirm under the weight of his own lies. The journalist I had contacted, Emily, was making progress. She had dug up some dirt about Jake's previous relationships, uncovering stories of heartbreak and betrayal that he had spun into comedic gold. It was fascinating to watch how easily people would spill their secrets when they believed they were just gossiping. I had managed to position myself as a sympathetic figure, someone looking out for the well-being of those who had been hurt by Jake's antics. One afternoon, I received a message from Emily, asking if I could meet her for coffee to discuss her findings. My heart raced at the thought of our conversation. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the tipping point where my plan would gain momentum. I agreed to meet her at a small cafe downtown, where the ambience was cozy and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. When I arrived, I spotted her sitting at a corner table, her laptop open and a notepad filled with scribbles. She looked up as I approached, her expression a mix of curiosity and determination. "Thanks for meeting me, David," she said, gesturing for me to sit down. "I've been looking into Jake, and I think I've found some compelling material." As she spoke, I listened intently, my mind racing with possibilities. Emily detailed her findings about Jake's past relationships, how he had a pattern of using women for material in his routines, and then discarding them when they no longer served his purpose. Each revelation fueled my anger and solidified my resolve. This was not just about revenge. It was about exposing a man who had manipulated others for his own gain. "What do you think about writing an article that highlights his hypocrisy?" I suggested, my voice steady. "You could frame it as a piece about the darker side of comedy, how some comedians use real-life pain to entertain while leaving a trail of emotional destruction in their wake." Emily's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "That's a brilliant angle. I think it would resonate with a lot of people, especially those who have been hurt by him. I just need to gather more testimonials and evidence to back it up." We spent the next hour discussing potential sources and angles for the article, and I could feel the excitement building within me. This was more than just a revenge plot. It was turning into a full-blown exposé that would rip apart Jake's carefully crafted image. I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me as I envisioned the headline splashed across the local newspaper. "Behind the laughter, the truth about comedian Jake." After our meeting, I returned home, my heart racing with the thrill of my impending victory. Sarah was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and when I walked in, she greeted me with a warm smile. I felt a pang of guilt for the secrets I was keeping from her, but I quickly pushed it aside. I couldn't let my emotions interfere with my plan. "Hey, how was your meeting?" she asked, stirring a pot on the stove. "It went well, just some work stuff," I replied, trying to sound casual. "How was your day?" As we chatted about mundane topics, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease creeping in. I was building a wall between us, one that would be hard to break down once the truth came out. But the thought of Jake's downfall overshadowed any feelings of remorse I had for my wife. I was consumed by the idea of revenge, and my focus was unwavering. A few days later, I received a call from Emily. "I've got some big news," she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "I found a woman who was willing to go on the record about her experience with Jake. She was devastated after their breakup, and she has some pretty shocking details to share." I could hardly contain my excitement. This was the breakthrough we needed, the final piece of the puzzle that would cement Jake's reputation as a fraud. I encouraged Emily to arrange an interview with the woman, urging her to get every detail. I wanted to ensure that when the article was published, it would leave no room for Jake to wiggle out of the mess I was creating for him. As Emily worked on her article, I continued to attend Jake's shows, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to execute my plan. It was a twisted game of cat and mouse, and I was determined to win. I watched him perform, noting how he used humor to mask the pain he had caused others. It only fueled my anger further, and I found myself imagining the moment he would realize that his career was crumbling beneath him. Then one evening I received a text from Emily. "The article is ready. Are you ready for the fallout?" I felt a rush of adrenaline surge through me. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I took a deep breath and replied, "Let's do it." As the clock ticked down to publication, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. My plan was about to unfold, and I couldn't help but wonder what the consequences would be, not just for Jake, but for me as well. I was stepping into a world of chaos, and I had to be ready to face whatever came next. The stage was set, and soon, the laughter would turn to gasps of shock. The day arrived when Emily's article was set to be published, and with it, the culmination of my revenge plan. I woke up that morning with a knot in my stomach, a mixture of excitement and anxiety swirling inside me. I could hardly eat breakfast, my mind racing with thoughts of how Jake would react. Would he crumble under the pressure? Would Sarah find out about my involvement? The possibilities were endless, and I felt a sense of anticipation that was almost palpable. I spent the morning glued to my phone, refreshing the local news website where the article was to be featured. I imagined the headlines, the shocked faces of readers, and the inevitable fallout. Behind the laughter, "Exposing Comedian Jake's Dark Side" was the title that echoed in my mind, and I could almost hear the gasps of disbelief as people read it. Finally, around noon, I saw the notification pop up. Emily's article was live. I clicked the link, my heart racing as I read through the piece. It was everything I had hoped for and more. Emily had woven together the testimonies of several women who had been hurt by Jake, painting a picture of a man who used his charm to manipulate and deceive. The article detailed his relationships, how he had made jokes about the very pain he had inflicted on others, and how he had left a trail of broken hearts in his wake. I felt a rush of satisfaction wash over me as I read the words. This was not just an article, it was a weapon aimed directly at Jake's reputation. I shared the link on my social media accounts, my heart pounding with the thrill of the impending chaos. I could hardly wait to see how he would respond. Within hours, the article was making waves. Comments flooded in, ranging from shock and disbelief to outright anger. People began sharing their own experiences with Jake, recounting stories of how he had wronged them. It was a snowball effect, and I felt a sense of power I hadn't experienced in years. This was my moment to reclaim control over my life, to expose the man who had taken so much from me. But as the day wore on, I found myself grappling with an unexpected wave of guilt. I had set this chain of events into motion, and while it felt exhilarating, I couldn't ignore the reality of what I had done. I was destroying a man's career, his livelihood, and possibly his mental health. I tried to push those thoughts aside, reminding myself that he had brought this upon himself. He had betrayed me, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. Later that evening, I received a text from Sarah. "Have you seen the article about Jake? It's everywhere. I can't believe it." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I had been dreading this moment, knowing that she would inevitably connect the dots. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation that was about to unfold. "Yeah, I saw it. It's pretty shocking," I replied, trying to sound nonchalant. "Do you think it's true?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Who knows, it could just be a hit piece," I said, deflecting. "But it seems like a lot of people are coming forward." I could hear the wheels turning in her mind, and I felt a pang of guilt for lying to her. I knew I was playing with fire, but I couldn't stop now. I needed to see this through to the end. As the night wore on, I watched the news unfold on social media. Jake's fans turned against him, and his shows began to be canceled one by one. It was a spectacle to behold, and I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction as I watched his world crumble. I imagined him sitting alone in his apartment, reading the article and realizing the extent of his downfall. The thought made me smile. He was getting a taste of his own medicine, but my triumph was short-lived. A few days later, I received a call from Emily, her tone urgent. "David, we need to talk. Jake is planning to fight back. He's going to release a statement, and I think he's going to try to discredit the article. My heart sank. I had anticipated some backlash, but I hadn't expected him to come out swinging. What do you mean? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He's claiming that the women in the article are lying and that it's all a conspiracy to ruin his career. He has a lot of supporters who are backing him up, and they're rallying to defend him. This could get messy. I felt a surge of panic. I had anticipated Jake's reaction, but I hadn't considered the possibility that he could turn the narrative against me. What can we do? I asked, desperate for a solution. Emily paused, and I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end. We need to gather more evidence, more testimonials. We can't let him turn this around on us. I'll reach out to the women again, see if they're willing to go on record again. But we need to act fast before he gets ahead of this. As we hung up, I felt the weight of my actions crashing down on me. I had unleashed a storm that was spiraling out of control, and I was caught in the eye of it. I had wanted revenge, but now I was faced with the reality of the consequences. I was in too deep to back out, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was turning into something far more dangerous than I had ever intended. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't help but wonder what I had set in motion. I had wanted to destroy Jake's reputation, but I was beginning to realize that I might also be destroying my own in the process. The thrill of revenge was fading, replaced by a gnawing sense of dread. I had to find a way to stay one step ahead of him, to ensure that my plan wouldn't backfire. But how? My mind raced with possibilities, and as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. The following days were a whirlwind of tension and anxiety. Jake's response to the article had ignited a firestorm. Supporters rallied behind him, and his social media accounts became a battleground. They claimed the article was a smear campaign, orchestrated by jealous ex-girlfriends and bitter acquaintances. I watched in disbelief as the narrative shifted from Jake being the villain to him being the victim of a conspiracy. Emily was working overtime to gather more testimonials and evidence to support the claims made in the article. She was relentless, reaching out to anyone who had ever crossed paths with Jake, hoping to find more people willing to share their experiences. Meanwhile, I found myself pacing my apartment, consumed by a mix of dread and determination. I had to protect my position and ensure that my involvement remained hidden. One evening, as I sat on the couch, scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a video that made my heart race. It was a live stream featuring Jake, pacing back and forth in his apartment addressing his followers. He looked disheveled but confident, a stark contrast to the man I had envisioned crumbling under the weight of my revenge. "Listen up, everyone," he said, his voice steady. "I know there's been a lot of talk about me lately, and I want to set the record straight. These accusations are baseless. I've never cheated on anyone, and I refuse to let a handful of angry exes dictate my career." The comments flooded in, with supporters echoing his sentiments. "We believe you, Jake. Don't let them drag you down." My heart sank as I realized that he was gaining momentum. He had turned the narrative back in his favor, painting himself as a misunderstood artist battling against a wave of false accusations. I felt a surge of panic. I needed to do something to counter his claims, to remind people of the truth. The emotional turmoil I had been feeling morphed into a burning desire to act. I couldn't let him win, but how could I fight back without exposing myself? That night I met with Emily again. We sat in a quiet corner of a bar, the dim lighting providing a sense of privacy. "We need to come up with a strategy," I said, my voice low. "Jake is turning this into a sympathy play, and we can't let him get away with it." Emily nodded, her brow furrowed in thought. "I've been thinking the same thing. We need to dig deeper into his past, find something that will resonate with people. Something that proves he's not the victim he claims to be." As we brainstormed, I felt a spark of inspiration. What if we could find a way to expose his lies in real time? We could arrange for a public confrontation, something that would force him to face the truth in front of his supporters. Emily's eyes widened with excitement. "That could work. If we could get a couple of the women he's hurt to confront him during one of his shows, it would be powerful. It would show people that he can't just hide behind his jokes anymore." The idea took root in my mind, and I felt a rush of adrenaline. This could be the turning point I needed. We began to devise a plan, reaching out to the women who had previously shared their stories. We needed their courage to confront Jake publicly, to expose him for the man he truly was. Over the next few days, we managed to gather a small group of women who were willing to participate. They were nervous but determined, fueled by the desire to reclaim their narratives. I coordinated with Emily to ensure that we would be ready for the next show Jake was scheduled to perform. The stakes were high, but I felt a sense of purpose igniting within me. When the day of the show arrived, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. I knew that this could either be a monumental success or a catastrophic failure. As I made my way to the venue, I could feel the tension in the air. The crowd was buzzing with anticipation, and I took my seat, my heart pounding in my chest. As Jake took the stage, he was met with applause and cheers, his confidence radiating as he began his routine. I watched him closely, noting how he effortlessly engaged the audience, making them laugh with stories that masked his true self. But I was focused on the plan unfolding behind the scenes. Emily was backstage with the women, ensuring they were ready for their moment. I could see them pacing nervously, their expressions a mix of fear and determination. I felt a sense of solidarity with them. We were all in this together, fighting against a man who had used his charm to manipulate and deceive. As Jake continued his routine, I could feel the tension building. The moment was approaching, and I was both exhilarated and terrified. I glanced at Emily, who gave me a reassuring nod. It was time. With a deep breath, I stood up and made my way to the front of the stage, my heart racing. The audience fell silent as they noticed me, confusion etched on their faces. I raised my hand, signaling for Jake to stop. He looked taken aback, his humor faltering as he tried to process the interruption. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice tinged with annoyance. I took a step forward, my voice steady. "Jake, we need to talk about the truth behind your jokes." The crowd murmured, and I could see Jake's expression shift from surprise to anger. "Who the hell are you?" he shot back, attempting to regain control of the situation. "I'm someone who knows the real you," I replied, my voice unwavering. "And I'm not the only one." At that moment, I gestured for the women to join me on stage. They stepped forward, their faces resolute. The audience gasped as they realized what was happening. This was not just a confrontation, it was a reckoning. As the women began to share their stories, I felt a surge of empowerment. They spoke of their experiences, of the pain they had endured at Jake's hands, and the way he had turned their heartbreak into punchlines. The audience was captivated, and I could see the tide beginning to turn. Jake's facade crumbled as he struggled to maintain his composure. He attempted to deflect their claims, but the truth was out there, and the audience was no longer on his side. I felt a sense of vindication wash over me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment where Jake's carefully constructed world began to unravel. But as the confrontation reached its climax, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I had crossed a line. I had wanted revenge, but now I was witnessing the consequences of my actions in real time. The emotional weight of the moment hung heavy in the air, and I realized that I had unleashed a storm that would not only impact Jake, but also everyone involved. The crowd erupted into a mix of applause and outrage as the women finished their stories. I stepped back, allowing them to take center stage. As I watched Jake's world crumble around him, I couldn't help but wonder, had I gone too far? The confrontation had been a success, but I knew that the fallout would be significant. I was left standing there, grappling with the reality of my actions and the consequences they would bring. The aftermath of the confrontation was a whirlwind of chaos. As Jake's carefully curated image began to collapse in front of the audience, I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and dread. The applause from the crowd echoed in my ears, but it was soon overshadowed by the realization of what I had set in motion. I had wanted to expose Jake, to make him pay for his betrayal, but now I was left grappling with the fallout. After the show, the venue was filled with reporters clamoring for comments, and social media lit up with reactions. Videos of the confrontation went viral, and it wasn't long before Jake's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. I watched as he struggled to maintain his composure, his bravado crumbling under the weight of the truth. The once cocky comedian was now a man cornered, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction at his downfall. But as the initial thrill faded, I found myself questioning the morality of my actions. I had orchestrated this entire spectacle, and while it felt justified in the moment, I couldn't ignore the fact that I had played a significant role in dismantling another person's life. The women who had confronted Jake were brave, but I had manipulated their pain for my own revenge. The guilt began to seep in, and I felt a heaviness settle in my chest. In the days that followed, I stayed in touch with Emily and the women who had joined me on stage. They were riding the wave of empowerment, sharing their stories and finally feeling heard. I admired their strength, but I couldn't shake the discomfort that lingered in my mind. I had wanted to expose Jake, but at what cost? As Jake's career spiraled, he released a series of angry statements trying to turn the narrative back in his favor. He claimed he was a victim of a witch hunt and that the women were merely seeking attention. The more he fought, the more the public turned against him. I watched from a distance, feeling both vindicated and uneasy. I had achieved what I set out to do, but the victory felt hollow. Then came the day I received a call from Sarah. "David, we need to talk," she said, her voice tight with tension. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I knew that she had seen the videos and read the articles. The truth was out there, and I had no choice but to face it. When we met, the air was thick with unspoken words. Sarah looked at me, her expression a mix of hurt and confusion. "Why didn't you tell me about your involvement?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I opened my mouth to speak but found no words. How could I explain the depths of my plan, the darkness I had willingly embraced? "I thought it was about justice," I finally said, my voice shaky. "I wanted to protect what we had, to show you that I wouldn't let him get away with it." "And what about us, David? Did you think this would fix everything?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with disappointment. "You've destroyed him, and for what? To prove a point." Her words struck me like a slap. I had been so consumed by revenge that I had lost sight of the bigger picture, our relationship, our love. The guilt I had been wrestling with came crashing down, and I realized that in my quest for justice I had jeopardized everything. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but I didn't consider how it would affect you. I was blinded by anger." Sarah shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "This isn't just about Jake. It's about trust and honesty. You've been living a lie, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this." As we sat in silence, I felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me. I had set out to destroy a man, but in doing so, I had risked losing the woman I loved. The realization was gut-wrenching. I had traded my integrity for revenge, and now I was left with nothing but regret. Weeks passed, and Jake's reputation continued to plummet. His shows were canceled, and he became a pariah in the comedy community. I watched as he faded from the spotlight, the once promising career now reduced to a whisper. But with each passing day, I found it harder to celebrate my victory. The guilt gnawed at me, and I began to question whether I had truly won anything at all. In the end, the confrontation had exposed the truth, but it had also revealed the fragility of my own morality. I had taken a dark path, one that had led me away from the man I wanted to be. As I lay awake at night, I realized that revenge had not brought me peace. It had only left me with a heavy heart. Eventually, I reached out to Jake, offering a private apology. I knew it wouldn't change the damage I had caused, but I felt compelled to acknowledge my role in his downfall. I wanted him to know that I understood the pain of betrayal, that I too had lost something precious in the pursuit of vengeance. Jake responded with a terse message, acknowledging my apology but making it clear that the damage was done. I didn't expect forgiveness. I didn't deserve it. But I felt a strange sense of closure in finally confronting the consequences of my actions. As for Sarah, our relationship remained strained. She needed time to process everything, and I respected that. I had to face the reality that I might have lost her for good. The man I was before the betrayal was gone, replaced by someone who had crossed moral boundaries in the name of revenge. In the end, the lessons I learned were harsh but necessary. Revenge may have brought a fleeting sense of power, but it also left me with scars, both on my heart and on the lives of others. I had set out to destroy a comedian, but in the process I had lost sight of what truly mattered: love, trust, and the integrity that defines us. As I moved forward, I vowed to rebuild my life, to seek redemption, and to learn from my mistakes. I could only hope that one day I would find a way to heal the wounds I had inflicted, not just on Jake, but on myself and the people I loved. And as I stepped into a new chapter, I realized that the hardest battles are often fought within ourselves. I had wanted revenge, but what I truly needed was forgiveness.